Happy Tiny Home Tuesday. It's Lindsay, the tiny home lady with Experience Tiny Homes. And this week's Tiny Home Tuesday is about two things. First, Black History Month, and all about the Black Wealth Initiative that is happening. It's so important. If you've caught any of my social posts or things that I've talked about, it's so important to know the history as to where we came from. And for so many, I look at my parents who were born in the early 40s and now they're in their late 70s. I was born in 1970. And in their time, when they were born, there were people of color that were not allowed to actually own a home, or at least now to actually have the ability to get financing for a home. And so this month, I really want to shout out the California Housing Agency because they're focusing on providing more opportunities for people of color because generationally, it has not been possible for them to buy homes and to actually have financial products that were so easy to get. I had no idea about this at all. I really didn't. And when I learned about this, I was horrified. I was like, wait a minute. This really limits generations of wealth, the ability to pass on housing into, your next generation is something that was not provided to everyone in this country. So by the time I was born, it was illegal to practice redlining practices, which then turned into zoning. But the sentiment and all the energy that had been put into it was already still there. So I'm about to bring on a guest speaker, coming all the way from the couch behind me on the tiny home, my husband Eric Wood, to talk about the magic of compounding interest and compounding wealth. Eric Wood joining.
Hey, everybody. So yeah, compounding interest. I was just thinking of a new application for just the old math, which is little changes early make huge differences later. And, we've probably all been exposed like this, start saving in your 20s.
Yes, start saving in your 20s. If you're 20s, start saving.
That's only just one of the applications. The other one had to do with this Black History Month. And I was thinking about, take two families. If one has a 2% advantage of wealth per year, their wealth is going to grow by 2% more than another family's, given how long of a history do you want to do?
Well, so let's say the 40s, so 70 years.
Go with 70 years since the 40s?
Yeah, when my parents were born.
Yeah, her parents are in their 70s, my parents are in their 80s. By the time that generation is old and what they're passing on, the difference of little differences up front create
over a long
huge
time.
Differences at the end. And I just heard something that they've looked at the size of inheritances of a typical white family and a typical black family, and it's 6 times greater.
And what's the biggest place to generate wealth? Well, your housing.
House is a
you're
big
obviously
part.
living in your home, so that's a big part of it. But you can accrue a lot of value and then downsize. That's such a big part of the movement right now.
More if your family is more likely to rent, then you're more likely to end up in debt, and even at the end of your life. If you're not...
Well, you definitely haven't built any equity if you've rented. That's how our story and this tiny home came to be, is that we totaled up 7 years of rent in Marin to $108,000.
Yeah.
Funny. Our tiny home actually equals that amount.
So what we don't own is the land beneath the tiny house.
Correct.
And that's a puzzle that we're figuring out by doing this ADU gig.
Which we'll talk about next.
Yeah, we'll talk about next. And it's actually it's so funny. They say oh, my house went up. I bought it at this much and I sold it at this much. It's actually the land that the house is built on that's actually appreciating. The house is depreciating because it's getting older. You often look up how old your house is. Oh, it's 50 years old. Well, it needs an update. Well,
Needs a new roof. It needs a new kitchen. Yes.
yeah, the house declines in value, but the land goes up. My parents are sitting on some of the most ex, valuable land in the country,
In Palo Alto.
right in the middle of Silicon Valley.
And they bought at about $60,000
Yeah.
in the area of Palo Alto in the 60s, right?
Mhm.
There was still like
And-
you know, what is it? Fruit trees next door.
Right, and that was probably 3 times my dad's salary, which means, I mean, if he had, this is hypothetical, but if he had put all his money into buying a house, he could have paid it off in 3 years.
Which was very viable back in the 70s. It was like 2 or 3 times your income, and now we're in more of like 6 to 8 times your income.
Yeah, so you have to work a lot longer to pay off that same, and people, I remember reading a thing that said, put 25% of your salary into your housing costs. Do you remember reading something like that?
Right.
It's like being like in my 20s.
And now we've got so many
You got
people
doing 30
to 50% or
60%.
more. And that is where we get into this whole affordable housing reality. It's a crisis. We've got the natural disaster crisis and the pandemic crisis. And so one of the focuses is to tap back into our real estate investment experience. We actually have flipped about 7 homes. Only one of those was a brand new home built from the land. And all of them have made a return on investment, but we've decided to really focus our experiences and buying up properties in San Diego where affordable housing is definitely needed, and also putting the accessory dwelling unit on foundation on the ground. I was really, really, really excited about being tiny homes because San Diego, you could put tiny homes in backyards. However, they don't appreciate in value. I'll mention tiny homes on wheels, right? When I say tiny home or accessory dwelling unit, they're not one and the same. An accessory dwelling unit can be up to like 1,200 square feet, which for someone's like, that's a huge home. Well, it's still half of the average size of an American home, which is 2,500 square feet. So even building a home at 1,000 to 1,200 square feet, you know, and in California, I'm seeing prices in the like 200 to 300,000 for that kind of home, probably less than 200,000 for something in the like under, you know, around the 500 square feet. So there's a lot of viability going on here. There's modular, very exciting. So bringing you some interesting news for Tiny Home Tuesday. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Very